what it looks like writing a rational to what you have been doing before, probably in your research or thesis seminar or anything like that. Take a second and reflect. What is similar of what you guys been doing um, to developing a rational? Stephanie.
Well, good evening, everyone. Something that is really like similar in this part is the justification that we usually write when we want to do any research. So when I was reading everything and I was like searching because I didn't know that like that term like rational. I just know justification, and I had to search like more information, but I realized that it was like the justification or the base. Why are you going to do that? So I don't know. I don't think that this is really hard for us because when you want to study or you want to research something, you have like your justification. You know why do you want to do that. So it's just like part of the theory that want to support your like your job, your research.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Something similar as the justification that it is weird to say justification. So when you show up in your master's degree here in the States and or in Europe, you're gonna say like, "This is my justification," and your professor is gonna be like, "What? Like, what are you justifying yourself?" Because justify actually for them mean kind of like argue why you're doing something, but it's not very scholarly, right? So instead of rational, it's like the logic framework, like why is this relevant, where I got this idea from, right? So it's what is going on. So it's kind of like the inverted pyramid model. For probably you have seen that model in writing, in academic writing, which is you always start with the broader terms. However, in the Western mindset, I don't know if you have read research done by our scholars in Latin America. So everything starts like, for example, if you're doing a thesis in, I don't know, marketing or something like this, there will be in ancient Egypt, once upon a time, there was like the Babylonics who invented writing in caves for advertising. Like, so we go so far back, like it's like we always relate to history, right? So a common mistake when we shift in qualitative research from Latin American scholars to scenarios in the United States or Europe is that. So I remember when I went to my PhD and I was like talking about health communication, right? And I did a rational about once upon a time there was shamanes in Latin America, and from there 1,000 years happened until we have public health. And my professor laughed at me and was like, "Are you telling are you telling me a story, or are you are making a story about a geographical event that happened and how health got to Ecuador, right?" So in the different sense, I want to discuss with you. Instead of academic papers or books in English, you probably have access to those in any point in your career. How that writing is different than ours. You can open a Google Scholar and look at anything really fast right now, how those papers usually are, or like theses or anything done in the US or Europe system, how they start. Okay, Carolina.
Hello. Well, recently I'm an intern and helping in the research center of my faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're a research assistant?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, kind of. And I'm also in the editorial part of STOA and all of that stuff. Yeah. And when I'm looking for the first script that uh, the authors sent to the journal, they usually need a lot of corrections and need a lot of people to be participate to be finally public. But in the first in the very beginning of the process, many of them should start in the abstract, like just to the point. Maybe if we are talking about urban planning, they attack to the there is this problem in this city, in this country, and this is the proposal for solving that, or this is the main theme or the main characteristic that we are talking about in this paper, like this way, this kind of structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So it goes specifically, great. So through your experience, you can tell that. Sorry if I also correct specific terms, because this is also the point that you guys learn how to say specific things you're doing in Spanish that are not exactly the same in English. So an intern, for example, is when you're doing your practicas, like prácticas preprofesionales, an internship. So you go as part of your requirements to graduate and you do I don't know, blueprints or designs in architectures, right? Like, or you go and do any specific things or any of your degrees. But a research assistant or RA, here in the States, everything is like RA, like TA or stuff like that, which is teaching assistant, research assistant, like ayudante de cátedra, ayudante de investigación. So you guys can relate to those little terms. So for example, yes, papers in English is like, we're gonna talk about why the best color for baking houses are clear colors because affects the mood of the people living in the house. I'm inventing. And this is our theory. And for doing this study, we went into this specific method and da da da. So that's the abstract. The abstract is like a little chunk that says everything that research is about, right? So we are starting from scratch. Before you can do that, because the abstract is the last thing you write, it's never the first, you have to do the rational. So where I'm coming from, where all these ideas are coming from, where all these examples or these interests, but also is a way of arguing back to the reader why I want what I want to do is relevant. So for example, when you next year or now on, like you're applying to a PhD program, a master's program, and you want to focus on research, your cover letter kind of have to say that. Like, I wanted to explore why sustainable architecture can use gender theories to build houses that are more gender inclusive. Because in the past, everything has been done by men, and you start pulling the literature that you know, right? So it's like, currently people do not do this. Like, why I'm doing it, right? Like, why is this relevant? So a rational is an intellectual exercise for you to really realize and be critical to your topic, like why what I want to do is something relevant or not. So usually when you want to do a study, you have to write this thing, like draft it a couple times on hand and in paper, and say like, okay, what I want to do is really relevant or not. So you also have to like kind of read a little bit of literature or address the specific events that prove that what you want to do or say has some level of interest and context. Okay, Martin.
Denise, I have a doubt because the rationale is really it looks like the framework. So I wanted to ask you, what is the difference? I don't know if in the rationale you put like more of a personal point of view in that part, or what is the difference? Because on the framework you also like compare and analyze some of the previous research that has been done on the area and a little bit of literature review.
Right.
So I'm kind of confused between those two.
Right. So a rational is barely a document that allows you to start developing a research project in a scientific way. It's not for your thesis in the point of an undergrad. However, it can help you out. This is a tool that can help you out to think about what I should do and what I shouldn't do, right? So this is just like an essay, a personal essay for yourself. However, when you're doing a master's thesis or like a grant study, like you run some funds for a research project, you will have to do a rational, right? Because you have to advocate, I deserve this money for doing my project because this of that, because it's aligned with research, because there's gap in literature that do not address what I am asking for, right? So this is barely before the literature review. So the theoretical framework, marco teórico, or state of the art or literature review is only the core theory, models, and concepts in which your study is going to be grounded on. It has nothing to do with the rational. But in order to give it a strength to the argument of what you do, you must cite studies and evidence that show what you're saying is real. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yes, and when you have like your article ready, like already written to publish, the rationale goes in the article, or is just a document that it's apart from the article that you send for people to help you and fund your research?
The rationale is pretty much a document that will help you out to run a research proposal for funding.
Oh,
Or
okay.
if you're applying to a PhD master's program and say like, this is something that I want to do. So let's say you say like, I want to go study graphic design in NYU in New York. Let's say that's the case. And you want to apply to be accepted, but also to be a research assistant with a professor that you admire, like his work. This is something you will have to be able to do for yourself. So it's a way of saying, hey, this lady knows what she's talking about. Like, she knows the literature. It's a way of proving yourself, but also later on in your career, if you become a researcher, you will have to do this as part of the grant proposals for applying for funding. There's actually a section in those documents that's like rational. And the rational is exactly what you guys are writing right now. So it's kind of like an introduction, let's say it in Ecuadorian terms, justification, but do not say justification, I told you so. So of why this is relevant, why I know what I'm talking about. So let's go fast forward and you're applying to your master's then or PhD program. You will have to do this, saying, hey, this is what I want to study because I want to do this, this, and that, and because there's evidence that nobody has done it, or there's a gap in the literature that I want to cover up, and this is how I plan to do so. So even if you get an interview for a scholarship or something like that, you can use all of these intellectual scientific exercise to argue with evidence that you know what you are talking about. We have to do that all the time. That might sound exhausting, but when you're doing qualitative research and you are applying for a job. So for example, when I was hired by my work by University of Cuenca, and later on here at Cal Poly Pomona, a section of my job interview was like, what do you research and why? I had to use my rationale, right? Like my job, my research work interest is grounded in this area, and I'm covering all of.
I think it's interesting because it takes into account the perspective of a lot of people and all of the people that are concerned about the problem. It's like a lot of, it's more subjective, and you have a like deeper answers, making everyone participate on the data collection and in the analysis of the problem. So you have a better analysis and a closer look, more humane look of the problem, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Because it helps you, as you say, also evidence the real implications, right? Like what's going on in a public space, why people is relating or feeling in a specific issue, but also different that qualitative and quantitative research, participatory action research involves the people that has the issue itself as researchers in the process, right? So here researchers from a university act as a facilitator of the system, right? So for example, you will be organizing these sessions as in Palante to overcome the situation of discrimination in a public space, right? Like they didn't let the Latinos in this school hang out and say like no hangueo, right? Like put a sign on there, like they don't want them to hang out on a specific hallways of the school, which is a discriminatory practice, because if everybody can do it, why they cannot, right? They're part of the community. So how they overcome these traditions of avoiding people to get gather in public spaces also was enriched with racism and systematic racism, and also how people was marginalized from the community in different ways, right? So I want to hear from you questions about participatory research. What things of this video or this project do you understood or were like a little bit, I don't know, not completely clear of how that might work?
Denise, teacher,
Yes, Gustavo.
this type of research has a qualitative focus or quantitative, or
This is
could be both.
participatory. It's a different animal.
Is that right? Oh, okay.
Yes. We can say that it's more leaning towards qualitative, but it's not the same. So it's co-constructing knowledge and solutions with people. And these are the kind of new methodologies that are hype right now. Because, for example, if there's an issue, you have to involve the person that's suffering the issue because they know the lived experience of why that happens or how that feels, how that affects to them. So it's making them part of your team to work and develop a solution that has to be implemented and then reassessed and revalued. So do you understand how it works? It's not only saying how much or how many or how this happens, is going beyond that. Okay, Carolina.
Okay, so well, 5 months ago I was in Mexico doing a workshop with the architecture students from the UNAM, and I don't know if it applies as a participatory thing, but we went all this course, and all my group from University of Cuenca to make a walk into one of these, I don't know how to say it properly, barrios,
Neighborhood.
but like neighborhood. It's
Mm.
right. Okay, a particular neighborhood, and take notes about how are we feeling in many parts of it, and make a method, a huge unified methodology to analyze all these data that were taking notes, both the students from UNAM and the students from Cuenca.
Mhm.
And then we make the results, the final I don't know how to say, but the final ideas we have, and the conclusions, that in some parts people uh, don't feel like welcomed, because there is many houses with barriers and many plants, and it is like the rich part of the neighborhood, like where the rich people and their houses, and also in that park, like a little park, was a security ward with a dog,
Mhm.
and we were like, well, it's okay to be here because is there a security ward? And he says, yes, it's public indeed, but I'm here to take care of the surroundings. So it also, then we walk 2 streets farther, and we have found out that it's a lot of garbage, and it makes the whole I don't know, the whole street went worse. And yeah, there was many garbage in the streets, and we will feel more insecure, and that's the kind of feelings and the contrast all in the same neighborhood. And yeah, it's my experience, and I think it was interesting to to make action of it.
Right. Thank you, Carolina, for sharing. That's actually a really interesting project. And it's very common to have architects and urban planners working with participatory action research with local communities to analyze public space or why specific spots on the city become dangerous. Um, because there's always phenomenon going on. There's always something going on that makes people feel unsafe or turns the situation in unsafe scenarios, right? So, any other questions about this project? What do you think this project might be useful for? This methodology? For what this project can be useful for, this methodology? What topic in your field? Let's take 5 minutes to rest, and I'm also gonna disconnect and reconnect so I can upload the video to YouTube. Otherwise, they don't allow me to upload long videos to YouTube. So we're gonna take five. It's 5:45. We're gonna take 5 minutes and connect immediately. Okay. Okay, great. Let's wait a couple minutes. Stephanie. Okay, going back to our class. What ideas did you have? Like, what do you think you can do with participatory action research, for example, in psychology or like in chemical sciences or graphic design or chemistry? Like, which are your fields, right? Like, or industry development, Gustavo.
Well, I think this participatory model, for example, I've been looking in my career about innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So how all kind of innovation product, innovation process, and I think this particular research could help us to achieve endogenous um, progress in the enterprise or even in the society. For example,
Mm-hmm.
we have this in an enterprise, of course. Every aspect, every change has to be documented.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to have this more innovation process, okay, I think this particular research could help. For example, like tell to the workers, what do you think we have to do in order to improve this process? Or what do you think we have to do? You have worked with the machines, with the I don't know the the fabrics. The For example, in what do you think we can do in order to improve?
Mm-hmm.
Some kind, I don't know how to say some supervisors
Mm-hmm.
have the don't have the time, obviously, to have an eye in every part of the industry, right? So the worker is the one that is always 24/7 in that process. So in order to improve,
Mm-hmm.
this would be an excellent project to apply participation investigation in order to improve processes and innovate.
Mm-hmm. Great. Exactly. In innovation, industry, and technology, participatory action research outside of being a scientific tool, it's used, for example, in design thinking projects, right? So I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys have seen like typically entrepreneur office. Oh my God, sorry. There's a car that always comes at this time that it looks is gonna explode a bomb. So that's the beep beep that you're hearing probably. So give me a sec. Okay. So, when I moved here, I thought it was like an alarm, like anything was going on fire or something like that. I ran out of my apartment a couple of times, was like, no, it's the car of my neighbor. He always arrives at this time and like that beeping comes. Always when I'm on Zoom meetings, so I'm sorry. Okay, so in this specific scenario, it's very interesting to understand, right? Like a factory or somebody that performs an activity does this kind of research. So app developers, people that makes apps for phones, people that makes software or want to improve the online experience of a person will do participatory action research in the way of design thinking. So all these post-it notes that are pasted, color-coded about ideas like what people like, what people don't like, why they don't like it, like why they don't go into this function, it's because it's unfunctional because of this. So it's kind of like mind mapping the reasons, the causes, but also exploring those options. So you can do participatory diagrams, for example. You can do many materials and explore even sensitive topics. So for this second hour and the upcoming week, I'm going to leave you with a couple readings. That's very important for this kind of methodologies. So I'm gonna devote it a little bit more of time in this week than other qualitative methods, because you probably haven't seen this ever, and probably you won't, but you can also learn for this because it's actually a very useful industry tool. So whenever you want to design something that really speaks to people's experiences, to tailor or develop something innovative that really adapts to people, do participatory action research, right? So how I apply it as a researcher, we do prevention campaigns, for example, for COVID-19. When COVID was on, I had lots of work that I'm still writing about, how to prevent people with specific chronic illnesses, or how to manage their chronic illnesses plus having COVID. So what issues a person with asthma will have, what issues an elder person with probably other illnesses could manage. So we had to go in depth to see how they deal with having the illness plus dealing with COVID plus dealing with post-long COVID, right? So we wanted to know like what people is feeling, how people is experiencing that, and from those experiences, offering them tools to cope with the illnesses. So they were like, actually, there's medical studies that said like if you eat healthier, your immunity will get better. But a person that's not an expert will not understand that eating healthy will help them out in the long haul. You know what I mean? So how I make these materials into healthy recipes so people with other illnesses will eat healthy while having COVID and not getting sicker. You know what I mean? So it's very detailed process. So as Gustavo was saying, it is very interesting if I want to make, for example, let's say a franchise. So what's the hot topic right now? Starbucks is going to Ecuador, right? Everybody's like, it's the best thing ever. It is not, actually. Juan Valdez is they have better other things that are better from Starbucks, actually. So in order to know how to produce a better customer experience in a service, you will need this. So sometimes it's also use mystery shoppers. Do you know, like they record people, for example, going to shop to see how the retail, the customer service is, how people treat them in the store, and they record a little video about that, how the product gets packaged, like what's the whole experience of shopping a specific thing. So they will take all that information to make it better or to adapt in a way that really speaks to the customer and builds up their loyalty, for example, in marketing. So in other scenarios, for example, let's say in chemistry, you want to know why people or in lab biochemistry, why people is scared of getting blood samples when they go to the lab, right? It's because you pinch them too much, it's because there is a line, it's because they're scared of getting contagious with COVID, and how you can make that space better so they just let their fluids taken away, right? All of that is part, for example, of public health. So this tool is highly applicable, it's versatile as a chameleon, but it requires a couple things. What do you think is very important in the role of a researcher to do as a specific, as addressing, for example, the human experience of somebody else in a sensitive topic, such as, I don't know, gender violence or inequity, such as we saw in Palante? What specific things and mindset do you think the researcher has to adopt in order to do this project, this type of project? What your positionality should be and how you get to that point?
You have to be objective.
Yes, you have to be objective, but sometimes what happens to researchers in the name of objectiveness? how sometimes researchers are when addressing people.
They have some opinions that can induce to a bias.
Right, they have their own biases, right? So, oh, they don't know about this, I know better. How do you know? You don't know that person really, right? So you cannot assume things, but we always come with biases. We're human beings, right? Oh, that person looks like he's always gonna get laid. You don't know, right? So you always have like assumptions based on culture and privilege, social social positioning, and all of that will affect the situation. So one of the key factors to not be an unethical, inhumane researcher, such as the Tuskegee case that you guys been looking, is a practice called self-reflexivity. Have anybody heard about self-reflexivity before? Do you want to share, Carolina?
Well, oh, okay. About self-reflexively, I get that it's about, well, take why I'm doing this and what it's moving me to. Oh, it's okay, okay. My internet failed a little bit.
Mhm.
Why I'm doing this and what is moving me, what feelings are taking part of my decisions in this research. And sometimes I usually think that most of the the feelings are passionate about a topic, and but also it's the we're taking importance in some topics because it's related to us.
Mhm.
And this is the part that takes part. And maybe if I, well, for example, in that video that you just showed us, um, they are talking about racism. And well, taking part of that is feeling discriminated by other people and feeling anger and feeling some bad emotions.
Mhm.
And maybe we need to be careful about that, um, by approaching people. And if it's necessary to approach people to making interviews, it is important to measure how we are talking about this topic, because we need the clear point of view of the other people. And yeah, I think that it's
Right. So actually, you're right. I think specifically, we come with all these ideas, right? There's always a motivation that's moving us behind as human beings to do so. We always have like our personal agendas, and that's completely fine. However, it's how much you push your privilege as an educated person to get your means around somebody that's more vulnerable than you, right? So dismantling this idea, and we have psychologists here, thank God, is always also how people play their power in society, right? How I use my power. So do you guys go back in time and think about when you guys graduated high school, right? And you were barely accepted to University of Cuenca, right? And think about now, when when do you have more power? Back then as a high school student or now as a almost college graduate? Marines, what do you think?
I think that now, because when we are like young, people don't take us serious. Even now, it's like they think that we are like we are grown sometimes, but it's not that exact.
Okay, so sometimes people, not even now, will take you as a professional, as a young professional. That's fine. Yeah, that's a reality. And what that happens is because there's many layers. In the case of women of color, such as all of us here, Latinas and mestizas, we have some lower level of privilege than men because our society is built that way, right? So even if I have a PhD and I make all this work and stuff, probably a white male from the United States will be more listening than but because plus I'm an immigrant, right? But back in home, my privilege is a little bit higher. Why? Because I have education, because I have studies, I speak another language, but here I'm like anybody else, right? Do you see how even moving from one place to the other can change your positionality and your privilege? So this is a concept that rarely undergrads understand until they get to graduate school. And there's the ethics besides the Tuskegee and all of that. In practical means that in general terms, you cannot be a jerk by doing research. You cannot play smarty pants being a researcher. You have to be an ethical researcher. Because what happened to the Tuskegee case? These minority groups that didn't even have education believed the doctors were helping them. But no, they were using them as guinea pigs, right? And that is unethical. In research, you can end up actually doing the same. And it's very easy to do it. When you act by the movement of doing an interview to somebody, you're taking time and space of that person to share vulnerable information with you. So a really important practice is how, before doing the research, you become aware and really honest of what you want, but also how you're gonna use the knowledge you're creating in order to support the people that's collaborating with you. So we're gonna talk really openly and honestly, right? There's many people publishing papers and doing wonderful work and all of that, right? How much of that work actually comes back to the community and people? Very few and sometimes none, right? So self-reflexivity on qualitative studies and participatory studies actually tackle that situation. Talk about the elephant in the room. When you fill out a survey, when you make an observation, when somebody is sharing their time and space with you to do research, you have to be respectful enough, but also acknowledge their contribution. And I'm not talking about co-authorship. In sometimes co-authorship is important, but actually giving them back something besides a compensation that, oh, for participating in this study, you have like a super maxi gift card, right? That's usually what you do for compensate the time, but also how the information you're producing actually can change disparities, social justice, make the environment better, build a better system for mental health care, and so on and so on, right? So I'm gonna leave you with that, and I'm gonna upload 2 readings that I want you in the upcoming weeks to take enough time to read and make notes for yourself and write like a one-page reflection about your own self-reflexivity, but also about what this author said. So this paper has like a very disruptive title, which is unsettling colonial practices of research. So thinking about colonization, right? I always resent Spain. I don't like Spaniards, and let me tell you why. Because when I have to face so many issues every day, like paying taxes, making paperwork, I always think to myself, I'll be happy in the cajas, probably like combing the hair of my llama or my alpaca or fishing and having like a supernatural life and don't worrying about anything. Probably running away from bears or animals like chasing me around, right? Like, so colonization or decolonial studies, probably you have heard of them. It is not like this hippie woohoo thing. It's actually a philosophy that is being used, is being used here in the Western world because they know research is destructive and manipulative to people. So I want you guys to have this reflection because it really make a change for me as a researcher. Now I always think about when I want to do something that's meaningful beside a research paper that nobody's gonna read and they have to pay for it to read and only works for my promotion, how I use my knowledge to actually make something good for the world. Right? Like something that goes beyond my pocket, beyond my CV, beyond what I can brag to my students in the States and in Ecuador. Right? How actually I use my tools for like moving and shaking something a little bit, right? That's something interesting. So we're gonna dump the class there, and I want you to take time, and I highly recommend you take the time to get that paper. If you want to print it out or save it or read it on your laptop, in your phone, print it or anything like that, and read it with an open heart and an open mind. It's very transgressive. It can make you upset too. But I want you to have the opportunity to read something that either way can help you or other way can like, what am I doing, right? That is for you to question yourself a little bit. Okay, guys, thank you so much. See you next week. Don't forget to send your assignments, all right? Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.